Yeah, I would just like to take a moment to welcome Don Brown to the center virtually, as we were talking hopefully next year in person, but for now virtually. Don is the founder of Kadampa Center in Raleigh, North Carolina, one of the flagship centers in FPMT, and so he's also been teaching for many years, and is very kind to accept our invitation to teach this weekend for us. So I'm really grateful that he's here. Just wanted to thank him for being here, and please take it away.
All right. So, yeah, I'm very flattered to have this opportunity, and like I was telling Venerable Lovesley, I've never been to Noble Ling, but I look at this your spiritual program and hear about the new beautiful center that you're creating. I'm like really hopefully one day we'll be able to visit there and for in person. So I'd like to start out just we'll do a few minutes of breathing, mindfulness of the breath, just to kind of create a little distance between the busyness of the morning. Although you guys, for me, it's 12 noon. I think it's 10 a.m. there, I believe, right? Hopefully I got this right. So I'll be going, I might need a little warning when 2 o'clock rolls around to tell me to begin to wind it down. And then we'll take a 2-hour break, and then we'll go for 2 more hours after that. And honestly, I don't have this thing broken down into like, we'll do this for 20 minutes. And, we'll just work our way through presenting the path. And we'll definitely spend the last part of Sunday afternoon on the subject of the wisdom of emptiness, at the very least. And as many of you know, these teachings they're presented. I'm going to use the 3 principal aspects of the path, or the 3 principal paths, as the basic text for presenting the path. But they're taught sequentially. But when we practice, we need to be practicing all 3 aspects of the path, or principles of the path, at the same time. So we'll begin with the breathing meditation, just create a little separation. And so I'm going to recommend that if you're sitting on a cushion, which you're probably not, but I'm not, I'm sitting in a chair, but sit upright with your back straight, and maybe take 3 long breaths, breathing in through your nose, and then exhale through your mouth, and just sort of fill up your lungs and your abdomen with air, and then just let go of it with exhalation. Do that 3 times, and then begin to follow the breath. Just naturally follow the flow of the breath as it comes in and goes out. So even for all of you experienced meditators, it's very easy for the mind to wander away from the experience of breathing. Sometimes it's helpful to count the breath, or focus on the rising and falling of the abdomen, or the expansion of the chest, or the sensation at the tip of the nose. Wherever you choose to focus, your contract with yourself is to have your mind 100% focused on the experience of breathing as it changes moment to moment. And as much as you can, and for us beginners, it's developing bodhichitta, or this altruistic intention to become enlightened based on loving compassion. That's the motivation that needs to be the intention for the whole 2 days of teaching and meditation. So as much as you can, in the beginning, it's effortful. We call it developing effortful bodhicitta because it's not our default attitude, is it? It's very, we're usually very self-centered, self-absorbed, but here we're just, as much as we can, we bring that altruistic motivation to saying the prayers and then to listening and doing the meditations as we go through these next 2 days. It'll go very fast, just like life, go very fast. So I have a copy I have my own copy here, thanks to Venerable Love Song. So let's do the refuge and generating bodhicitta prayer. And you guys are so blessed to have great teachers like Don Hendricks and Venerable Ravina, and people like that, just amazing. So I'm sure they've gone over these prayers and what they mean. So I'm not going to take the time to go over those, but we'll just go over we'll start out with the refuge and bodhicitta, and you can say it along with me. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. We'll do the, I think the next one is just the short mandala offering. So we'll do that one. This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru for continents, the sun and moon. I imagine this as a Buddha feel and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. And then and we'll do the request to turn the wheel of Dharma. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Radna Mandala Kamyata Yami. So I think we'll probably do the some sort of dedication at the end of today, and we'll do something more extensive at the end of the teachings on Sunday. So, so I have a promise about this next 2 days. My promise is this: that we will, and it really depends on our motivation. And as much as possible, I've tried to develop an altruistic motivation to teach the teachings, and that I hope that you listen to it with that attitude. And if we do that, I promise you that we will plant seeds that will ripen in future happiness and even our enlightenment. And also, I promise that you will come away with this weekend, although this is a hard one to make, but that you come away with at least one nugget of Dharma that you'll be able to put to practice in your life that will make a difference with your family, the people that you live with, you interact with on a daily basis. So that's my promise to you. And in terms of who I give credit to for this particular, I give credit really to my teachers. And I'll say a little bit about myself so people will know where I'm coming from, because you don't know me. Most people don't know me. Maybe there's a few people there that do, but most don't. So I really give most credit to Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa, and to His Holiness. Those are my principal teachers. And so back when my daytime job, by the way, is back in the late 70s, was I'm a physician, and I'd done some training and had been working in emergency medicine. I guess I'm not going to compare myself to the Buddha, other than I around that time in my late 20s, I had sort of an existential crisis, like, there's got to be more to life than this. This, the sort of American way of drug, sex, and rock and roll, and you can add to the list of things that a lot of us spend our lives in pursuit of. Well, all the things that I had done, and I'd been living in Portland, Oregon at the time, which is really a great place to experiment and do lots of fun things, skiing and kayaking and mountain climbing and hiking and all that sort of stuff. I'd done all that stuff, and I felt there's got to be more. And so I took everything I had and put it in storage, and I set up a couple of jobs, one in Kenya and one in India, volunteer work. But I just really got a ticket around the world. I wanted to see different cultures and just get out of North America, basically. So basically started out, going through Japan and Hong Kong and Singapore, and then through Thailand, and ended up in Kathmandu at Kopan Monastery, and they were having the November course there, and I went up there to take pictures. There was a friend that I had met down in Kathmandu that day, the night before he was going up to talk to Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and his name was Thomas Szymanski. I still give him credit for introducing me to the Dharma. But anyway, I went up there with my camera, and I ended up meeting Venerable Karen, who talked about the November course, and it was a 1-month course. I had to commit to being there 100% of the time, and I remember going because I had other things I wanted to do, and places I wanted to go, and mountains I wanted to, trek on, and all that sort of stuff. But it was sort of a crucial moment for me that I made the decision to stay at Copan and do that 1 month course. And that was in November of 1978. So, that's a long time ago, 44 years ago, almost 44 years ago. So I consider myself an advanced beginner. I don't consider myself a guru by any stretch of the imagination. But I did take time off on 3 other occasions. That I was gone for pretty much a year that time, and not all that time, but maybe 6 weeks was 6 or 8 weeks I spent at Copan, and then but then I traveled and came back and took a year off, and was again most of that year was spent at Copan and Bodh Gaya and in Sri Lanka and studying and doing retreats and trying to integrate this material a little bit more. And then I went back again and in the mid '80s to Dharamsala predominantly, and to live there. I got some opportunities to get lots of teachings from some great teachers, and particularly His Holiness was obviously teaching at the up on the hill. I was working at Delic Hospital some of the time there. So that was so I had those kinds of experiences. Then when I came to Raleigh in North Carolina back in the late '80s to start my medical practice, which now we're celebrating my 35th year in doing family medicine in Cary this summer, but just started teaching some how to meditate classes. Basically, when I look back on it, a lot of it was the stuff that we were doing, and that includes the material in Discovering Buddhism. But anyway, that's sort of to let you know what my background is. And again, I do not consider. I mean, you could pin me down pretty quickly if you started getting into a lot of esoteric teachings. I'll do the best I can to present the material and what I feel like has been helpful, and particularly in a practical sense for me over the years that I've been working with the material. But I give credit. The credits really go to Lama Zopa, Rinpoche, and Lama Yeshe, who I took refuge with, and His Holiness, who I've had opportunity to have many teachings from, and then the resident teachers at Kadampa Center, and then the many visiting teachers that we've had over the years, including Venerable Rubina, who I don't know if we'll ever get her out of Santa Fe again to come back to Raleigh. Apparently she loves it so much there, but so people like that just have all contributed to what little Dharma knowledge I have. So another point is that the text that I've chosen to use is the 3 principal aspects of the path. And I think you have access to that. And we'll read through that in just a minute. We'll read through the whole text, and then we'll sort of try to break it down and unpack those. I like that word, unpack, but we'll try to unpack those verses and then do brief contemplative meditations on the meanings of those verses. But as you know, there's a lot of in Buddhism in general, in Tibetan Buddhism in particular, we have lots of lists, and there's a lot of repetition. And the teachings even say that a teacher should try to repeat things at least 3 times. So it's not a bad thing to hear it again and again and again. And I can remember once I was in Bodh Gaya, listening to His Holiness give teachings, and there were literally 10,000 people there. He was under the Bodhi tree, and beside him were his teachers, and his teachers were sitting there listening to his teachings. And I was going, this is really interesting. the people that taught him, for example, I think he was teaching something along the 8 verses of mind training. But anyway, his teachers who taught him that were there listening to him teach it again. So you get the feeling that you can't hear this enough, even if you're a teacher. So again, there'll be quite a bit of repetition, and as you know too, that the Dharma is packaged. I mean, the package it's packaged a lot of different ways. I mean, we talk about the lamrim, the stages to the path enlightenment, with the beings of the different capable beings, and then this text, the 3 principal aspects of the path, is in essence the same as the lamrim, but it's slightly different, very slightly different. But it includes all of the same teachings that are included in the lamrim, or at least they're implied. For example, there's nothing in the 3 principal aspects that actually talks specifically about, for example, choosing a guru, or even the tantric teachings, where you might talk about the vows and practicing generation, completion stage, and all of that. There's nothing in this particular text about that, but these things are implied in the teachings. And I also used, the main text I used was I think it's Lama Tsongkhapa's version of it. That was, and this was, and I think Pabampa Rinpoche gave a commentary on that, and that's the main text that I've been studying a little bit recently to try to get myself prepared. So, without any further ado, I want to jump into want to read one text. I don't think you have. I'm pretty sure you don't have a copy of this, but I'm going to read it because it's, if you when you hear about the teachings on death and impermanence, you think, oh my gosh, that's so negative. But actually, I find it extremely inspiring. And so this little bit that I'm going to talk about now, this text it's just a few verses from a text about a Pabampa Rinpoche called Heart Spoon. And I'll read this out loud, and you think about the meaning as I read it. Ah, the hurt, kind Lama, look to this pitiful one, how I behave and how I've cheated myself my entire life. Please look upon this mindless one with compassion. The essential advice to give yourself, heart spoon, keep it deep within your heart. Don't be distracted. Don't be distracted. Reflect upon the state of your life from the essential drop at your heart. Since beginningless cyclic existence, which hasn't ended up till now, though you've experienced countless cycles of rebirth, just so many variations on happiness and pain, you've achieved not the slightest of benefit from them. And though at present you've attained leisure and fortune so difficult to find, always till now they've finished and been lost, have been empty and without meaning. Now, if you care about yourself, the time has come to practice the essence of future happiness, virtuous actions. You appear so capable, smart, and clever, but you're a fool. As long as you cling to the child's play of the appearances of this life, suddenly you're overwhelmed by the fearful Lord of Death, and without hope or means to endure, there's nothing you can do. This is going to happen to you. Now, don't be distracted. Right this moment is the time to steal your will. It's not only time, it's almost too late. Right now, Apply yourself with great force. Holy precept of the Lama, kind father, heart of the authoritative scriptures of the victorious Losang. Practice the pure path of complete sutra and tantra. It's time to place real experience upon your mind stream. Who's the faster, Yama, the Lord of Death, or you in your practice of realizing the essence of your eternal dream, the welfare of both yourself and others as much as you can each day, unifying the three doors of your body, speech, and mind? Put the whole of your effort into your practice. So now let's read together the three aspects of the path. This is translated by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and we'll read this together. I apologize, I have a fair amount of post-nasal. My voice is what it is, but I'll do the best I can. So we'll read this. We'll read the text, not the, this at the beginning. It says the promise to compose. We won't, or the expressing homage. We won't read that part. We'll just read the extra text. I bow down to my perfect gurus. The central meaning of the victorious one's teachings, the path praised by all the holy victors and their children, the gateway of the fortunate ones desiring liberation. This I shall try to explain as much as I can. Those who are not attached to the pleasures of circling, who strive to make freedom and endowments meaningful, who entrust themselves to the path pleasing the victorious ones, you fortunate ones, listen with a calm mind. Without complete intention, definitely to be free from circling, there is no way to pacify attachment, seeking pleasurable effects in the ocean of circling. And by craving for cyclic existence, embodied beings are continuously bound. Therefore, at the very beginning, seek renunciation. Freedom endowments are difficult to find, and life has no time to spare. By gaining familiarity with this, attraction to the appearances of this life is reversed. By thinking over and over again that actions and their effects are unbetraying, and repeatedly contemplating the miseries of cyclic existence, attraction to the appearances of future lives is reversed. When, by having trained in that way, there is no arising for even for a second of attraction to the perfections of cyclic existence, and all day and night, the intention seeking liberation arises, then the thought of renunciation has been generated. Even if renunciation has been developed, if it is not possessed by the mind of enlightenment, it does not become the cause of the perfect bliss of unsurpassed enlightenment. Therefore, the wise generate the supreme mind of enlightenment. Swept away by the current of four powerful rivers, tied by the tight bonds of karma so hard to undo, caught in the iron net of self-grasping, completely enveloped by the total darkness of ignorance, endlessly born in cyclic existence, ceaselessly tormented by the three sufferings, thinking that all mothers are in such a condition, generate the supreme mind of enlightenment. If, like the mother whose cherished son has fallen into a pit of fire and who experiences even 1 second of his suffering as an unbearable eternity, your reflection on the suffering of all mother sentient beings has made it impossible for you to bear their suffering for even 1 second, and the wish to seek an enlightenment for their sake arises without effort, then you have realized the supreme precious mind of enlightenment. Without the wisdom realizing ultimate reality, even though you've generated renunciation and the mind of enlightenment, you cannot cut the root cause of circling. Therefore, attempt the method to realize dependent arising. One who sees the cause and effect of all phenomena of both cyclic existence and the state beyond sorrow as forever unbetraying, and for whom any object trusted in by the grasping mind has completely disappeared, has at that time entered the path pleasing the Buddhists. If the appearance of dependent relation, which is unbetraying, is accepted separately from emptiness, and as long as they are seen as separate, then one has not realized the Buddha's intent. If these two realizations are happening simultaneously without alternation, and for merely seeing dependent relation as completely unbetraying, the definite ascertainment comes that completely destroys the way all objects are apprehended. At that time, the analysis of the ultimate view is complete. Furthermore, appearance eliminates the extreme of existence, and emptiness eliminates the extreme of non-existence. If you realize how emptiness manifests in the manner of cause and effect, then you're not captivated by wrong notions holding extreme views. In this way, you realize exactly the vital points of the three principles of the path. Resort to seeking solitude, generate the power of effort, and quickly accomplish your final goal, my child. That is the text by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So a couple of things I want to put up front too. This is very much in keeping with the Buddhist tradition. Back at the time of the Buddha, when he taught, he always cautioned his students and anybody who was listening, said, listen carefully. Don't take my teachings just because I speak glibly or it sounds good or whatever. You need to investigate these teachings. You need to analyze every word I say. Make sure it makes sense. It doesn't harm you, doesn't harm others, and you've looked at it almost like somebody who assays gold might pour different chemicals on it to see if it's really gold. So in the same way, I encourage you to really listen whenever I speak. Don't, because I can make some mistakes. I'll do the best I can. My promise to you is, I have, like I said, I've been exposed to a lot of wonderful teachers and teachings, and I'll do my best to replicate what I was told, but I could make mistakes and probably will. And so I encourage you to listen critically and to analyze the things that I say and the things that you read. I think it's really important. So that's my disclaimer. I was telling Venerable Love Song earlier, many years ago when I met Lama Yeshe, who I was actually going to teach some basic how to meditate classes in Birmingham, Alabama, which is where I was doing my training at the time. And basically, Lama Yeshe said, don't get too uptight about it. He said, just giving people encouragement is enough, makes life worthwhile and enough. So, that's kind of where I'm coming from. I'll do my best. I'll try to encourage people with the teachings that we'll be going over the next day and a half. And we'll see how it goes. Then I have What other sort of what I'm going to call a slogan for I have sort of two things, two sort of slogans for this retreat. One comes from Lama Yeshe. When I got a chance to talk with him, this was, I don't know, a long time ago at Copan. And he, he was very sweet. He listened to me, and I was just, and I don't know if many of you had a chance to meet Lama Yeshe, but when you're with him, he's like 1,000% present. So it's like that kind of like the purest of listenings, and as I was leaving, he said something that I think is the essence of the awakening Mahayana bodhicitta. He said, as much as I can, I dedicate my life to others. So this is kind of like one of the what I consider one of our slogans for this course. As much as I can, I dedicate my life to others. And when we start to unpack that, we see that the whole Dharma is there within that sort of slogan. And the other one is one that I've not actually heard the Dalai Lama say this, but Jeffrey Hopkins, who used to be at the University of Virginia, I know many people know the name. He's written, I don't know how many books, 20, 30 books, whatever. The first 10 or so years that His Holiness was teaching in the West, maybe 15 years, Jeffrey was his principal translator. And Jeffrey spent many years in Dharamsala studying with His Holiness, working with these esoteric texts, trying to, really accurately say what was being said. And he said the Dalai Lama said that if the Buddha had a slogan, if there was like some like cryptic words that he could say that summarized the essence of the whole Dharma, if the Buddha had a slogan, and I actually wrote it, but you can't see it, unfortunately. But it says, if the Buddha had a slogan, it would be dependent arising. Dependent arising. Okay? Now, we're going to talk on Sunday when we talk, and maybe even before, since we talk about dependent origination and things like that, the same concept. Dependent origination, interdependence, dependent arising. But that's the term that Jeffrey used. And I'll say this much about it, that that everything, this is sort of in some way, this is the deep conventional truth, not the one that we ordinarily see. But in a way, everything arises or comes in existence and depends upon causes and conditions. There are three things, and we have to know these things, and we have to memorize these things, and we have to really understand what they mean. Everything comes into existence and depends upon causes and conditions, and dependence upon their parts, and independence upon a designating consciousness. So everything arises or comes into existence in dependence upon causes and conditions, its parts, and a designating consciousness, process of labeling, naming, like that. So dependent arising is basically encompasses all those three things. And that understanding and reasoning is what makes an understanding of emptiness possible. But that's why it's so important. And that's why the Dalai Lama says, if the Buddha has a slogan, it would be dependent arising. Something that you might want to, park that in your mind. And as we move forward. So let's see, how much time have we got here? All right. So let's see. So anyway, as you're listening to the teachings, I think most people have heard the story about the different kinds of pots. This is all in the text, and I'm going to use this. This is a one version that I particularly love. Although I have multiple different texts on the three principles of the path, but this is by this is an oral teaching by Geshe Sonam Rinchen and translated by Ruth Sonam. Geshe Sonam Rinchen taught at the library, the Tibetan Merchant Archives, for decades. And I was fortunate enough to get to know him and receive teachings from him. So I'm going to have to refer to this from time to time because there's a lot of information, obviously, in the three principles of the path. But you know, when you talk about as a student what we need to be doing, the way they talk about the three pots. I'm sure everybody's heard about the three pots, right? And then you can hear different, sometimes slightly different explanations of what the three pots are about. But one of the pots is like an upside down pot. Okay, and so an upside down pot, you know, there's the teachings just can't get in. You know, there's nothing can get in. You know, and this teachings you cannot enter your mind. Then there's pots with holes in it, and that's like a leaky pot. So you hear the teachings, and they just go in one ear and out the other. So we don't want to be an upside down pot. We don't want to be a leaky pot, and we don't want to be a dirty pot. And sometimes I've heard the explanation of the dirty pot is we bring a lot of preconceived notions that pollute the teachings, so we can't really get the essence of the Dharma. I think Geshe Center mentions talking about you know, but he's actually, this is a commentary on Prabhakar Rinpoche, but he's saying if you're motivated by a dirty pot spoils whatever is put in it, and it makes it unusable. You may listen attentively and remember what you have heard, but it will be of no true benefit if you're motivated by any of the poisonous, disturbing emotions that concern only with the well-being of this life. Which brings up another interesting point in that we talk about, I wish we had, you know, we could actually have some discussion about some of these points, but many times you hear like, we need to give up this life. We need to give up, you know, to be a true Dharma practitioner. We need to give up this life, and basically, there is some truth to that in terms of, you know, and some of the teachings will talk about, you know, giving up, you know, becoming a family. And becoming a monastic and so forth. But really, if we go a little bit deeper, because there are plenty of people who've taken live the lives of a monastic, who will still say, look, I haven't even come close to achieving renunciation. I still have tons of attachments. So basically, giving up this life is giving up attachment to this life, basically. Attachment to the pleasures of this life. And I'll say, before I get into the text, I'll say one or two other things about that. I know everybody's heard about the 8 worldly dharmas, the 8 worldly concerns. Excuse me. So right now outside in North Carolina, it's a beautiful sunny day. It's probably about 80 degrees, but it's nice and humid here. I don't think you guys have much in the way of humidity. Um, but anyway, so the eight worldly concerns. I remember I was in Thailand one time, and I met this this great Buddhist saint who I really think this was the essence of the Dharma. I remember when I first met him, I thought he was kind of, he didn't say much. So I was used to people kind of talking. But when I first met him, I walked up to him. I was trying to find where I was supposed to stay for this Vipassana retreat I had signed up for. And he sort of said, just go over there. And then the next day I found out he was the abbot. It was actually Ajahn, it was Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, who's like this very famous, considered to be a Buddhist saint. And he said, and he talked about a lot of things in his teachings, but one of the things he said that really relates to how we cling to this life. He said that we're addicted to deliciousness. I thought that so summarized the eight worldly concerns. We're addicted to deliciousness. He said, so the eight worldly concerns, we say, for example, that we're attached or cling to, the first one, I might forget one, so when I start getting into these lists, I sometimes lose my mind. But the first one I can remember is we're attached, or we cling to pleasure, right? And we don't like it when we don't have pleasure. And furthermore, when we get pain, we hate it. So the more we cling to having pleasure, the more we're unhappy when we're not experiencing it. And when we get its opposite, we're miserable, all because of the clinging. Nothing wrong with pleasure, right? We're just saying that the clinging is the problem. The clinging is what creates the issues. Then, so the second one is things. Like we're attached to gaining things, like material things, relationships, stuff in general. We're attached to things, and when we don't get what we don't get things that we want, we're not happy. And when we lose things, it's a big problem because we're attached to things. And when we lose them, when somebody steals our things or a house burns down, things like that, we suffer tremendously. Is there anything wrong with things? No. The Buddha is, this teaching is not about right or wrong. It's the clinging that comes from the self-cherishing, more than the self-cherishing mind, but it comes from our fundamental ignorance. It's clinging that causes the problem. So that's this, so now we've talked about, attachment to or clinging to pleasure and an aversion to pain. We're talking about clinging to gain and an aversion to loss. And now the third one's said to be like the biggest of all, the hardest one of all for us to deal with. And it's when we get bad mouthed. When we're we want a good reputation. We really cling to having a good reputation. It's like the thing in our lives. It's even more important than pleasure and stuff, according to the teachings, is our good reputation. And so we cling to that. And again, whenever the mind is clinging, it's not at peace. That's what we have to come to terms with. Whenever the mind clings to something, you can see it like a fist, right? Whenever the mind clings to something, it's not at peace. So when we cling to a good reputation, we're not at peace. When we don't get it, when we're not getting our good reputation, we're not happy. And when we get disgraced, when somebody badmouths us, wow, when we get disgraced because we cling to a good reputation. In fact, the more we cling to a good reputation, the more we suffer when we are disgraced. So that's kind of, again, the problem is clinging. The problem is not the good reputation. And the problem really is not being disgraced, because it's all part of life, isn't it? People are gonna say things about us that they're gonna put us down. It's just how it is. All of this is part of what life is about. And then the fourth one, and some people word it differently, but the fourth thing that we are, in terms of things that, delicious things that we're addicted to, is we're totally addicted to people's approval, which sounds a lot like good reputation, but it's different. We're addicted to people's approval. We cling to getting approval, and we'll do anything for others' approval. Okay? Again, getting others' approval is not the problem. It's the clinging that's the problem. And when we don't get people's approval, we're not getting disapproval, but we're not getting approval. We're just we want it. We want approval. So our mind is still is uncomfortable, even when we're sort of in a neutral state where we're not getting what we want, but still we're unhappy because the mind clings to deliciousness. And then when we get disapproval, wow, that's really bad, because now we're getting the opposite of what we want. So again, the more we cling to approval, the more we suffer when we get disapproval, right? The more we cling to a relationship, for example, or the more we cling to having our friends speak well of us, and on and on and on. The more we cling to our house, our car, all the things that Ajahn Buddha Das was talking about, the delicious things in life, and the list goes on. I mean, we're just using these four as examples, but the list is endless of the things that we that we want, that we cling to. But it's the clinging that creates the suffering. And what is the antidote to attachment or clinging? What is the antidote to attachment, to clinging? Well, there are several. There are quite a few. In the Buddhist teachings, we talked about different ones. But in a real sense, the antidote to clinging is to let go. It's just to let go. Certainly seeing the impermanence of things helps us to let go. Sometimes seeing things in a negative light, for example, if we're attracted to a person of the opposite sex, we have a lot of lust, and all we can see is whatever's delicious and wonderful about this other person. Then if we focus on sort of things that might be disgusting, that gives us a more balanced attitude, and then it allows us to maybe let go a little bit, let go of this clinging attachment. So these are some of the techniques that can be used, and in the mind training texts in particular, whenever a problem comes up, we're told to use the situations in our life to see the emptiness of those situations, that they don't exist in a concrete way, and that there are a multitude of interpretations. And then we look at it with Dharma wisdom and Dharma knowledge to transform what, for example, somebody, takes our significant other. This is the one that is particularly painful for everybody who's ever been in a relationship. If somebody runs off with your spouse or loved one or your significant other, it's very painful. And so, how do we work with that? I mean, one of the antidotes to jealousy is what? Rejoicing. Like, how great he got my wife or my spouse or my partner or my whoever it is that I find is wonderful. Rejoice in their good fortune that they now get to enjoy this other person or this other experience or whatever it is. So this, again, the Dharma has so many ways for us to look at that. But again, when we talk about giving up this life, what we really are talking about is giving up the attachment to this life. So I'd like for people to think of, and if you get a moment, if you have some paper to write on, I'd like for you to think of 3 challenging situations in your life. Now, we're not going to solve these. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to solve anybody's problems. I got my own, thank you very much. But I'd like you to take a minute and write down 3 challenging situations in your life that really are things that are really big challenges for you that you need to work on, that are pushing your buttons and you need help with, you need Dharma wisdom with. I want you to do that while I run and get some more water because I'm parched. But I'll be right back. Write those 3 things down. And you may have more than 3. Three's a good place to start. Now, I guess there's a way to raise your hand. We can take a moment before we do a meditation on the 8 worldly concerns. So if you have a question, this is a good time to raise your hand. Or I don't know if people can speak out or not. Is it possible?
People can just unmute if you would like, or you can use the raise hand icon under reactions.
Yeah, I can speak. Is that? Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Well, I didn't write down 3, but
Yeah. Well, yeah, this is any question you had about what we've talked about so far, but you can share your 3. That might get some support if you told people what your issues were.
right. Well, one is probably pretty common, dealing with my wife at home, and this is since like COVID, and also we remote work, so we're together a lot more than we used to be. So yeah, that's definitely difficult. And I try to be aware of my thoughts, my irritating, annoying before they like grow. So that's that's the pretty important, I think.
Yeah.
And I just
Good.
have.
Go ahead. Did you have something else to say?
No, that was only wrote down one.
Yeah. I noticed there's a lot of people have had, since they've been spending more time together with their family members during the pandemic. Of course, a lot of people work from home, and that can put a lot of pressure on relationships. And I think, I don't know if I think a lot of divorces have actually come out of this pandemic. There's almost like too much togetherness is backfired on some families in particular. I hear that in my work when I talk to people every day about how they're struggling. Anything else? Any questions about the 8 worldly concerns before we do a brief meditation on that? Okay, so we're not going to. I'm going to try to keep these meditations to maybe just 10 minutes, because there's not much time in the whole. I mean, we only have X number of hours to do this class, so we'll do 10 minutes. I'll use my cell phone as a timer on it. And so start out by taking some deep breaths. And this will be, I'll be guiding some of it, and I'll try to be quiet, particularly during the last half, so you can look at your life from the point of view of things that you're attached to and how they're causing suffering. Start out just maybe doing 9-round breathing, or counting your breath, or whatever works for you, for a minute or two to settle the mind. Again, as much as possible, effortfully set an altruistic motivation. So giving up this life, without giving up the attachment to this life and the pleasures of this life, there's no way to develop renunciation. And of the 3 principles of the path, renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness, renunciation is the very first one. And it really, it's, it is basically, renunciation and bodhicitta are very similar, very sort of the same thing. Renunciation is having compassion for ourselves, and bodhicitta is more focusing that compassion on others. But we have to look at how we cling so much to everything that is delicious, that we find desirable. And again, there's nothing wrong with with pleasure. There's nothing wrong with having things, material things, relationships, and so forth. There's nothing wrong with having a great reputation. People, thinking that you're amazing and special. And there's nothing wrong with having people speak well of you, you know, and having other people's approval. Nothing wrong with that. But it's, again, it's our attachment. We need to look how if you're in if you have a job that you really like and you get fired, how much you suffer. Why do we suffer? It is so much part of life, the sine wave of life. We just go up and down. That is samsara. That is the circle of uncontrolled causation called samsara that we're caught in. And it is just part of life, but we know that, and yet we suffer because we cling. We cling to what is desirable, and we sort of negative attachment or aversion to the opposite, what's undesirable. So again, the 8 worldly dharmas is how we cling to pleasure, right? And we cling to not experience pain. We cling to gaining stuff, and we cling to not lose stuff. Our mind clings to the notion of it's terrible to lose stuff. We cling to our good reputation. Again, this is in the text. It says this is the one that's the hardest one for us to let go of. We cling to our, to being, to having a great reputation, and we cling to not being disgraced. Being disgraced is part of the life. But if we cling to not experiencing being disgraced, that's where the suffering comes from. And then approval, other people's approval, our kids' approval, our co-workers' approval, our loved ones' approval, the people in our community, wherever we go, we cling to approval, and we cling to not experiencing disapproval. And we suffer not because of having approval, of course, that feels good. And getting disapproval, we don't necessarily have to suffer that. We don't have to suffer. It is part of life. So gain and loss, pleasure and pain, fame and disgrace, approval and disapproval, they're all part of life. They're all part of, the experience of being a sentient being with this impure body and mind. And yet, they're part of life, and yet we don't have to suffer because of these. But we do. We do because we cling. So take a look at maybe some place where you've lost something and it's caused you to suffer, and notice how the suffering, the losing is nothing. The real cause of the suffering is our sort of addiction to its opposite, but also attachment to not losing things. So take a look at as many of those, and then things that you may have in your life that you cling to, that you would call delicious, and how you fear the loss of those things, and how we cling, and that's what causes the fear. when we can notice, for example, how it was brought up relationships, and we're all very relational, and that's important. It's an important part of being a human being, and yet, if we're clinging to a relationship, you might notice it's very difficult for us to be honest with ourselves or the other person. If we're attached to somebody or a relationship and we're being mistreated in that relationship, and we're afraid to be honest. We're afraid to be the healthiest thing we could do would be to be honest and say what's our experience is. But if we cling to that relationship at all costs, we don't want to risk it. We don't want to risk losing it. We won't make the effort to notice when things are not right and then talk about them. It doesn't have to be a boxing match, but disagreements happen because we're human, and it is normal to disagree. And our attachments will for sure lead to disagreements, but they don't have to lead to bloodshed. So let's bring that meditation to close. And again, we don't have a ton of time to talk about things, but if anything came up for anybody in that, we're going to go on to renunciation in just a moment. But did anything come up for anybody in that meditation they want to talk about? Questions? So I read something. There's a guy in Raleigh who he's a professor, I think, in the engineering department. But anyway, he's become kind of a leader in teaching professors and teachers how to teach. And he said that at the end of a class, that whatever was said in the 70% of what's remembered is what is said in the first 10 minutes. And only 20% of what's remembered is said in the last 10 minutes. So I've already used up my time probably, but we'll keep going because we have until noon where, I guess it's just about 1 o'clock. Well, actually it's I have, it's about 11:19 now, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we'll talk about generate renunciation. Most people, in fact, I asked one of our Discovering Buddhism, so one of the other people, we have about 5 people that teach Discovering Buddhism, and I asked this person, I said, how do you meditate on renunciation? I just wanted to sort of see if they knew, and of course they know what renunciation is. I like Alex Berzin's description of renunciation is this determination to be free. This determination to be free of what? To be free of suffering. Now, a couple of things about that. Number one is this is my experience, we have a lot of problems with that because we don't think it's possible. we don't think it's possible. We don't think it's possible for us to be free of suffering. We don't think it's possible for us to even achieve, and forget about, achieving nirvana, freedom from suffering, but enlightenment, forget, that is way out there. That's no chance. So we're starting out from the very beginning. We're saying, I'm going to renounce suffering and its causes to be free. I'm going to be free. I have this determination to be free because I believe I can be free. But I'm saying we have to take a hard look at whether we even believe we can be free. And here's one of the things that has helped me more than, probably a lot of things have helped me, but meeting Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and spending time around these great teachers, more around Lama Zopa than anybody, Lama Zopa Rinpoche than anybody, but seeing people who clearly are at such a higher level than I am, and everybody says they're Buddhas, and I have a lot of faith that they are. Do I know that 100%? No, I don't know that. No more than I know for 100% that karma is true, 100% that rebirth is true. These are all things that and this is, by the way, I invite you to creatively align with the possibility that you could be free of suffering. You could. This determination to be free implies that you believe you could be free. If you don't believe you could be free, then you won't have any determination. What's the best way to keep somebody in prison? Is if they don't know they're in prison. They'll never try to get out. So until we realize that we're in this prison called samsara, we'll have no motivation to be free, to get out of that prison. So that's a big part of it. And then, of course, my kids. I try to teach my kids I have 3 girls, and I try to teach them like the four noble truths. I mean, I can't, even to this day, I can't get them to remember it but they've been around the Dharma Center, and hopefully a little bit of the vibe, and it's been good for them. I think it has. But the Four Noble Truths really gives us some hope that we could be free. I mean, basically, in the Four Noble Truths, the first teachings the Buddha gave in Sarnath, after he achieved enlightenment, he said, we're all sick. All worldlings are sick, and we are worldlings. WORLDLINGS, worldlings, ordinary beings. We're all sick. What are we sick of? We experience this thing called dukkha. Dukkha. We have, and we'll talk about dukkha more in just a few minutes. But we have the suffering of pain and change and pervasive suffering, and that's the nature of life, is chaos. There's this guy, Jordan Peterson, who wrote this book called 12 something, Antidote to Chaos. I've listened to the audible version of it. But yeah, we live in a world where things are chaotic, and it's normal. This is not unusual. We're all going to get old and experience that. We're all going to get sick, and and we'll die eventually, whether it's from old age or sickness, could be from suicide, could be from a lot of things. But we all got to experience all of these sufferings. And the Buddha said, so we're all sick. He said, and the illness has a cause, and the cause is karma and delusions. Delusions, the principal delusions being greed and hatred and ignorance, but pride and jealousy, and 84,000, right? And so we're all sick, and there's cause for the sickness, and so we identify the cause, and the root cause is our misapprehension of reality or ignorance. But he's saying the sickness can be cured. The third noble truth, that there's the cessation of suffering, that our suffering can come to an end. And the Buddha asserted that. No other spiritual tradition asserts that we can be in this lifetime, that we can be completely free of suffering and have bliss beyond our wildest dream, called nirvana, or even beyond that, enlightenment. But the Buddha is saying, we're sick, there's a cause to the sickness, it can be cured, and there's a path. There's a path to the cessation of suffering. And today we're using the three principal aspects of the path as a method. But this is all subsumed in the lamrim teachings, right? That's what we need to know. That's what we need to memorize. That's what we need to meditate, is the lamrim. And eventually we need to see reality as it is. As Lama Zopa Rinpoche one time I visited him when I was in Nepal, and I went up to see him, and he said, look, you can have renunciation all day long. You can have bodhichitta all day long, but until you can see things the way they are, until you have the wisdom of emptiness, you are still caught in this circle of suffering that we call samsara, cyclic existence. Okay, so we need to have this determination to be free of what? Free of cyclic existence. We need to have enough compassion for ourselves. This is why, this is where compassion for ourselves comes in. We recognize our situation and that it's miserable and chaotic, and we believe, because we've seen and the teachings have made sense, maybe we've experienced some benefits, we've seen these extraordinary beings that have achieved high states, even enlightenment, possibly. We believe that. I believe that I have teachers that are enlightened, that really supports my faith in the Dharma and my faith in my ability to be free. So so if we look at the stanzas, says the purpose of generating, so we talked about persuasion for listening. Now, the purpose of generating renunciation, without the complete, this is the third stanza, without the complete intention to be free of circling, there is no way to pacify attachment, seeking pleasurable effects in the ocean of circling. And by craving for cyclic existence, embodied beings are continuously bound. Therefore, at the very beginning, seek renunciation. So we are caught, as Jeffrey Hopkins uses the term, we're caught in this cycle of uncontrolled causation. We're constantly creating our samsara by our choices of body, speech, and mind. We're planting the seeds for future suffering and future circling in samsara. So what are the meditations to get out? How to generate renunciation? Freedom and endowments are difficult to find, and life has no time to spare. So freedom and endowments. What are the freedoms and endowments? We talk about, I'm not going to go into the 8 freedoms or the 10 freedoms and the 8 endowments. Can't even remember all of them. I can remember most of them, but not all of them. But, for example, what we're free of is we're free of living in a barbaric place. Like right now, if you were in the Ukraine, you couldn't practice the Dharma. There are many places in the world where, there are barbarians, where there's no opportunity to practice the Dharma because, people will torment religious practitioners. Or we have our faculties, like we're dull-minded. We don't have our mental faculties. We were born with Down syndrome or something else that, unfortunately, we don't have those opportunities. Or we were even born in one of the other realms, like as an animal. We can't really practice the Dharma as an animal. Don't take that. I've got animals that I used to have a golden retriever. I used to want to be like him because I think he was a great Dharma. He's really kind. But you know what I'm saying. There are a lot of problems, a lot of obstacles that that cause us to not be able to be free. We have these endowments. That what are the endowments? Like these are we have our health, we have an interest in the Dharma. We were born at a time when a Buddha descended, because sometimes Buddhists come and they look around and they go, wait a minute, there's nobody here that's even open, so I'm not even going to bother to teach. But the Buddha descended, the Buddha taught, and the Buddha didn't teach just the path to nirvana, they taught the path to full enlightenment. And we miraculously have interest in it. And so we have an interest in practicing. So rare for beings in our culture and in our world to have any interest in practicing. And we have a little bit of leisure and fortune. And we've met the perfect gurus. And we have these amazing freedoms from things that would impede our practice, and we've been endowed with these great opportunities, these things that have come together to allow us to practice the Dharma. So keep that in mind, and keep in mind that it could all end like that. It could all end in a moment. So freedoms and endowments are difficult to find, and life has no time to spare. It was like when I was reading Heart Spoon, seize the moment, steal this moment to practice the Dharma, to plant real seeds on your mind stream that are the causes of freedom, happiness, and even supreme enlightenment. Don't waste this time, because we don't have any time to spare. We talk about, these meditations, that death is definite. There's nobody that's lived forever. Nobody, no matter, even the Buddha manifested passing. Everybody has to die. And yet, this is really a big one for us, because if you look carefully in your mind, I'm making this assertion. I don't think we believe that we're going to ever die. We don't believe it. We think there's something in us, and I believe it has to do with our misapprehension of the way the self exists as something permanent and enduring, that we don't believe that we're going to die, but we intellectually, oh yeah, I'm going to die. So everybody's going to die, and we have to come to grips with that. So death is definite. You are going to die. This is going to happen to you. When will it happen? We don't know. Could be any moment. As every tick of the clock brings us one step closer to the moment when our karma for this life finishes. We have, death is definite, but the time of death is completely indefinite. So many of the things that we have in this life that are luxuries, like good food, but sometimes food can become the cause of our demise, and we don't know when that's going to happen. Or medicines. We have medicines that are supposed to keep us alive when we're sick, and yet we take a medicine, and the next thing you know, we have an allergic reaction and we die. We don't know when it's going to happen. We have all these wonderful things like cars and planes and boats and all these things that are great, that are great opportunities, but they can become the cause of our demise, and it can be any moment. It could be any moment. So death is definite. So the conclusion to that is I must practice the Dharma. Okay? Then we go, But the time of death, it could be any moment. Today, Lama Zopa says, when you get up in the morning, you should say, today I'm going to die. Today is the last day of my life. Could be even in the next hour, the next minute. But he encourages us to say, today I'm going to die. Because we do have a sense that it'll never happen, or if it does, it won't be today. So we have this. So death is definite. I must practice the Dharma. That's the conclusion. Time of death is any time, indefinite. Could be any moment. So I must practice the Dharma now, this very moment. And then the third one is that the only thing that's of any benefit at the time of death are the spiritual seeds that have been planted on our mental continuum. When you're on your deathbed, if you can remember to practice Tonglen and have compassion for others as well as yourself, and use that moment to even recollect the pure light, this pure light consciousness, and seize the subtlest level of mind and achieve enlightenment even at the time of death. How wonderful. So death is definite. Time of death is indefinite. The only currency that we can spend at the time of our death is spiritual currency. They're the seeds that we planted on our mind stream in this lifetime. The seeds that we planted on our life stream, on our mind stream in this lifetime. Granted, there's a lot of currency that's been planted, a lot of seeds that have been planted in countless previous lifetimes, but this is the lifetime we're talking about. So the conclusion is, I must practice the Dharma. I must practice the Dharma now, because life is short and could be over any minute. And I must practice purely, untainted by attachment and clinging to the happiness of the deliciousness of this life and so forth. I must practice the pure Dharma. So again, to get this realization of death and impermanence, death is definite. So I must practice the Dharma. The time of death is any time. It could be any moment. So I must practice it right now. And the only things of any benefit at the time of death are spiritual realization. So I must practice pure Dharma. Okay? So when we combine these two things together, which is the freedoms and endowments, like, wow, we've sort of walked into this. It's almost like we've been in this fog and all of a sudden the clouds have parted and it's perfectly clear. And we have this amazing opportunity called the freedoms and endowments to practice the Dharma and be free. And it could be over any minute. So I have to plant the seeds of the Dharma on my mental continuum as soon as possible. And so these two contemplations, seeing the freedoms and endowments, and that life could be over any moment, we loosen our attachment to the pleasures of this life. So that's what it says. And by craving for cyclic existence, embodied beings are continuously bound. Therefore, the very beginning seek renunciation. And by gaining familiarity with freedoms and endowments, and the fact that we could die any moment, attraction to the appearances of this life are reversed. So think about that. Is that true? Is it true that our attachment to the appearances of this life is reversed by contemplating freedoms and endowments, and that this life is really short? It could be over any minute. So let's do like a 3-minute meditation on that and see, do the freedoms and endowments that we have and recollection of death and impermanence, does that help us give up our attachment to the appearances of this life. So do that contemplative meditation. Think about that for just a few minutes. So life is so precious. The conclusion is life is so precious, and it could be over any instant, any minute. And we can use it to be free, to achieve not only freedom from suffering, but actually supreme enlightenment so we can help others. So we develop this renunciation. So make the determination to give up the attachment and the clinging to the pleasures of this life. Make that determination now. Such a precious life, so precious because it gives us the opportunity to practice the Dharma, the pure Dharma, from valid teachers, the pure teachings from an unbroken lineage, and the opportunity could be gone in an instant. We must practice the Dharma now purely and renounce the happiness of just this lifetime. So the next stanza is, again, these are the four meditations that you can do. The freedoms and endowments, and death and impermanence. Those are the first two. The second two are the ones we're going to talk about next. It says, let me see if I can find the right page. I missed it. Oh, by thinking over and over again about actions and their effects are unbetraying, and repeatedly contemplating the miseries of cyclic existence, attraction to the appearances of future lives is reversed. So by thinking over and over again that actions and their effects are unbetraying, what's that talking about? That's talking about karma. It's talking about the laws of karma, universal laws of karma, and repeatedly contemplating the miseries of cyclic existence. It's talking about dukkha, all the different aspects of dukkha. And the Buddha, taught it in this way, especially because when we're contemplating dukkha, we have to realize that we created the causes for it by the choices we made in the past. Whenever we're experiencing the miseries of cyclic existence, we realize we're not a victim. We're just experiencing the fruit of our past actions motivated by ignorance. So let's talk about the laws of karma. The first one that we always talk about, the four laws of karma. Most people, these are things that most people have memorized or should, and I think you should memorize these if you haven't. But the first one is that karma is definite in the sense that positive actions lead to happiness and negative actions lead to suffering. Or said another way, if we're experiencing happiness, it's because we did something virtuous. In fact, that's the definition of virtue. If something brings happiness, it was virtuous. That's the definition of virtuous. But in the moment of practicing, of making a choice, a lot of times we don't know. We don't know our motivation. Motivation is the key factor in karma, right? And the key, this is why we have to be so mindful of our intention. It's often karma is equated with intention. We have to be so aware of our intention because actions motivated by non-attachment in the moment, non-hatred, and non-ignorance always lead to happiness. Actions motivated by attachment and greed and hatred always lead to suffering. So we need to understand if the result was happiness, the action was something positive. If the result was suffering, the action was something negative. And that's why 2/3 of the Buddhist text are teachings on ethics, on ethical lifestyle, because that's how we create happiness. That's how we create the causes for liberation and enlightenment. So ethics is so very important, and making good choices is so important. So this is the first law of karma. Positive leads to happiness, negative leads to suffering. Second law of karma is that things are expandable. Karma is expandable. You can take a little, acorn and plant it in the ground and come back in 100 years and you have this, 5,000-pound tree. This little acorn that didn't even weigh an ounce comes back and it weighs 5,000 pounds because our karma, the tiniest of karmic seeds, and we're continuously in the finger snap. There's 65 mind moments in a finger snap, right? That's part of the teachings. And we're planting 65 karmic seeds with our body, speech, or mind in every mind moment. And those karmic seeds will ripen in the future in happiness or suffering, and it expands. So we have to pay very close attention to our choices, because if we are, if we say something that's mean or nasty, or if we can create negative karma by not even opening our mouths, by just the look on our face, or by the actions of omission, not necessarily commission, but we're constantly, so every tiny karmic seed is growing exponentially. So we need to look for opportunities to practice virtue, like giving money to the beggar, smiling at other people. It lifts their spirits. Practicing, doing our Dharma practices, doing mantras, and so forth, doing even purification practices, so important, because we're constantly creating the karma for suffering, aren't we? We're constantly creating the karma for future misery. And it grows exponentially. So just a little nasty word, just a little act of meanness could, in some future lifetime, ripening in us dying early or prematurely, or losing our lives. So tiny actions of body, speech, and mind grow exponentially, and it's also important. And I don't want to go too much into this because I don't have time, but we need to know how to purify karma. We talk about the 4 R's, right? The first is refuge. We have to go to the source, the source of our spiritual practice for strength, So the first is refuge and actually compassion. As a practitioner of the Mahayana lineage, compassion is part of this what we call refuge. The second one is regret. We have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be brutally honest when we've done something that's harmed ourselves or others. We have to be honest. So we have to have regret. I think in Catholicism they use the word contrition, I think, but I like the word regret. Regret. But we have to be honest with ourselves, and we're not. We do stuff and then we gloss over it like it wasn't a big deal. But we have, if we want to purify it, we have to sincerely regret from the depths of our heart what we did that was damaging. Then the fourth is the remedy. And the remedy could be picking up the phone, calling somebody up and apologizing. It could be doing Vajrasattva practice, doing 100,000 mantras of Vajrasattva, doing a 3-month retreat. It could be, doing prostrations. There are many Buddhist practices that are part of the remedy. But we need to be realistic too. In real life, if we've harmed somebody, and I know, for example, I have friends that do the 12 steps, and I've read them. And one of the first steps is clean up your messes. Go back and talk to the people that you have harmed. And if it's not going to create more problems than it already has, apologize to people. Clean up the garbage the messes that you've made throughout your whole life. It's so important to do that. Okay, so the remedy, and we do spiritual practices, like I said, mantras, prostrations, but also in real life, we apologize to people. We make amends for things we've done. Maybe we bake a cake for the neighbor who we know hates us, but we want to do something to sort of repair that relationship. And then the last one, which is considered to be the most important one, is called a resolve. And it's resolving not to do it again. Resolving not to do it again for a second, a minute, an hour, a day, or possibly forever. Or maybe the resolve is, as much as I can, I'm going to do my best to not ever do that behavior or action again that was destructive. All right? Because karma is growing exponentially, right? Then the next law of karma is that basically, if we experience a result, and I say we, not like Don, but I have a mental continuum that goes back to the beginning of beginningless time, literally. And every being that has inhabited my mental continuum has planted seeds. And those seeds are all ripening now. And so if I experience a result, and it could be positive, be it positive or negative, it's because I planted the seed for that result. And this is in a very important way, a way that is saying that we're accountable, responsible for our lives, be it good or bad. Everything that's happened to us in the past is the fruition of past karma. Now, this one's a hard one to swallow, but it is in the teachings. And it's very important to contemplate the profundity of this, that everything that we experience is the fruition of former actions, seeds that were planted on this mental continuum that I inhabit in this lifetime. Okay? And then the last law of karma is that it's never lost. That karmic seeds are never lost, with a couple of caveats. One is that we can destroy positive karma by anger. Like eons of positive karma can disappear with a moment of anger. That one's hard to believe, but it's definitely in the teachings. And it sort of makes sense because it's so heavy negative. And also we can purify negative karma, just like I went through the 4 opponent powers. We can purify negative karma. So there's this 4th law of karma, that karma is never lost, but that's not true. We can destroy positive karma with heavy negative actions, particularly anger, and we can purify negative karma by applying the 4 opponent powers. So again, 4 laws of karma, to repeat it, karma is definite. If we experience a positive result, we create a positive, it comes from a positive action. And we have a negative result, it was from a negative action. Karma is definite that way. Karma is expandable. Every tiny action of body, speech, and mind grows exponentially. That's why it's so important to review our actions at the end of every day, and purify those negativities before they become something huge. If you have a fight with your spouse, it's much better to clean it up now, or with a coworker or anybody. It's much better to clean up the mess ASAP, because the karma is growing like crazy, like an atomic bomb. And then we cannot experience a result without creating the cause, and the results of past actions is never lost, unless, of course, we destroy it with positive karma, with anger, or we purify negative karma by applying the 4 opponent powers. And the 4 opponent powers are refuge, regret, the remedy, and the most important one is the resolve. Because without the resolve, we could just go back and do it again, and that it doesn't work. It's got to be there, the resolve, the resolution, to as much as possible not do it again. So that's part of this second aspect of developing renunciation. What's the other part? It's remembering dukkha, or suffering. Now, we talked about suffering we was talking about, the big ones, or, the ones, when we talk about the Four Noble Truths, we talk about the suffering of pain. Okay, that could be broken legs, broken arms. It could be being, depression, break relationships, losing jobs, any kind of mental or physical pain that it would be easy to recognize would be one kind of suffering that we need to be aware of. And that suffering is the fruit of former actions. We need to go back and reflect the karma is the cause of that suffering. So we don't want this anymore, right? And then the one that's a little bit harder to recognize is the suffering of change. That everything is in a state of flux. Even the most pleasurable experience that you can imagine will eventually come to an end. And we'll be left wanting more. We'll be left dissatisfied. We'll be left with this craving for more. Lama Zopa said, the worst suffering in samsara is the suffering of this dissatisfaction. It's like low-level radiation. It's always there, and it's always causing problems. It's the worst suffering in all of samsara. We don't think of it that way. You can think of great food, great music, great sex, great vacations, beautiful sunsets, whatever it is, it doesn't last. And if that's all we did or had, it would turn into suffering. Eventually, it would turn into suffering. So there's a suffering of change, that nothing lasts, and it turns into suffering. Particularly, this suffering of dissatisfied mind. We're never satisfied. And then the last suffering is the most difficult to see. The first one's easy to see. The second one we don't want to see. But the third one is really hard to see, but the most important one to see is called pervasive suffering. And it's basically, we're caught up in this process of uncontrolled causation. And you can see it in your meditation practice when you realize how wild and crazy your mind is. You can't even count to 10. You can't even count 10 breaths sometimes without getting lost after 2 or 3 breaths. So our mind, we're caught in this sort of cycle of samsaric existence, uncontrolled causation. And the example that's given for this, which is really weird, but you think about it, it makes sense. It's like if I burned my arm, if I had like 3rd-degree burns. Actually, 3rd-degree burns don't hurt as bad as 2nd-degree burns. But let's say I had a burn, terrible burn, and I was in terrible pain all the time. And every now and then, I would get a picture of water, and I would pour like tepid water over this burn, and I would get some relief in the suffering. And I go, wow, that feels so good. That's blissful. That is so wonderful. But then I run out of water, and boom, the pain comes right back. So it's always there, even underneath our pleasure, even underneath these temporary pleasures, is this pervasive suffering caused by samsara. We can this example of the burn with water is the one that helps my mind so much, that it's something that we all have to deal with. All right. So, and then we talk about, other kinds of suffering. I'll finish in just a minute. We talk about other kinds of suffering, like, for example, the suffering of uncertainty. That there's never any certainty, in life. And then we talked about dissatisfaction, that, we're never satisfied. These are so-called 6 sufferings, if I can remember. And then there's the suffering of having to die again and again, to taking, we die again and again and again, life after life after life. We have to go through this whole cycle of whatever our lives were, and then we have to die. And I remember Jeffrey Hopkins gave the example when he was teaching one time. He said, if you look at Mount Everest, or even imagine Mount Meru, and took the skeletons of your former lives, it would be nothing. Those mountains would be nothing compared to the number of corpses that we've taken in countless former lifetimes, would dwarf Mount Everest and Mount Meru. Kind of weird to think that way, but we've died countless times, and we've taken rebirth countless times. Again and again and again, we've had to go through this cycle of being born. We get sick, we get old, and we die. And we don't like that. It's always miserable. It's always tough. And then again, there's this thing called high position leads to low position. We might be worth $1 million. We might be president of some big corporation or even a country. But eventually we go to a low position. Eventually, high position leads to low position. All composite things must separate into their parts. Everything that is born must die. It's just how it is. It's just how it is. And so when we go back and we look at these two meditations, one is the laws of karma. What goes around comes around. And I've created mostly negative karma because my mind's mostly pervaded by self-cherishing selfishness. And so the laws of karma are not in my favor here. And there's suffering. And look at the suffering that we've endured just in this lifetime and in countless future past lifetimes. We've had this, mountains and mountains of unbelievable amount of suffering. And we get back. Karma is definite. The seeds that I've planted will ripen in happiness or suffering, but mostly suffering. And we think about suffering, sincerely think about the suffering that we've created. And when we go back and forth, Karma is definite. You know, it's expandable. I can't experience a result without creating the cause. It's never lost. And look at the suffering. Simple: birth, sickness, aging, and death, dissatisfaction, high position, low position, dying again, being reborn again. It's going to happen again and again. It's all from my former actions. When we think about these 2 points, karma and suffering, it turns our mind away from seeking the happiness of future lives, because the future lives are going to be miserable because we've created the causes for that. We turn our mind to the Dharma, practicing the Dharma now, not pushing it off to some future lifetime, right? So it says, by thinking over and over again that actions and their effects are unbetraying, and repeatedly contemplating the miseries of cyclic existence, attraction to the appearances of future lives is reversed. So take 2 or 3 minutes to contemplate those 2 points and how that reverses the attraction to future lives. Karma and dukkha. Karma and dukkha. Karma, the laws of karma, and the fact that we have all experienced and will again experience dukkha. Do that for just a few minutes. And so make the determination based on your understanding, your feeling, your understanding and feeling that goes along with the meditation on karma. What goes around will come around. And dukkha, mostly repeated the causes for dukkha. So we turn our mind. I must turn my mind away from the happiness of future lives and practice the Dharma now. I must turn my mind away from the happiness of future lives to practice the Dharma now in this life. Practice it purely, as best we can. So we're going to relax, take a break. Went over a little bit. Sorry about that. I've done that before, by the way, going over. I'll try to be more mindful of time. But this afternoon, we'll be talking, and probably more tomorrow morning, we'll be talking about bodhichitta and how to cultivate bodhichitta. So have a nice lunch break. Wash your laundry, run an errand, do whatever you need to do. But to be honest with you, the time in our retreat, the time between sessions is really best kind of being quiet and trying to reflect on what you heard and maybe even putting some of it into practice, but not let your mind go wild in between the sessions. So we'll start back at I believe 4 o'clock your time. So that'll be an hour 50 minutes from now.
It's
Does that sound right?
we come back in 90 minutes, so 1:30.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was a 2-hour break.
No.
So I will. So what time are we going to be? We're going to be starting back. So right now it's 2 o'clock, 2:10 right now here. So we start back in basically at 3:30 my time. It'll be 1:30 your time. Is that
Yes.
right?
Mhm. Yeah. Then 1:30 to 3 today.
1:30
So.
to 3. Okay. Today. Okay. I got that. I misunderstood that. So we have an hour and a half this afternoon. So good. We'll rock right through the bodhichitta meditations and the topics this afternoon. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.